Welcome to the Jerome McClain Show. I'm your host, Jerome McClain, and let's get into our episode.
Intelligentsia, the endem of sarcasm, the nutty professor to your whack-ass marmalade. It's T-Bone from T-Bone and Chick Brew in the morning. Now available in podcast format. Simply search for the T-Bone and Chick Brew podcast, available wherever fine podcasts are sold.
Welcome to the Jerome McClain Show. I'm your host, Jerome McClain. Independent media that won't reinforce tribalism. We have one planet, nobody is leaving. So let us reason together. We're going to start the show off today like we started it off on the last episode with a shell question. So much controversy about the boat strike in the Caribbean. Why the constant chatter but no action taken by Congress? Thank you for the question, and let us get into the episode. So, let me break it down like this. Congress loves chatter because chatter is safe and action actually has consequences. So when I talk about the maritime strikes, the migrant boats, the interdictions, or the shoot, don't shoot protocols, costs zero political capital, taking action, that means owning the outcomes. And Congress actually hates ownership like a cat hates bathwater. If they strengthen authorities, they get blamed for the deaths. If they restrict authorities, they get blamed for letting people in. If they demand oversight, they get accused of undermining national security. If they ask for transparency, someone screams classified. So they argue, posture, grandstand, and circle the issues like vultures around a campfire. But the one thing that I have learned that Congress is afraid of doing is actually legislating. So when we get to the executive branch and the Congress, we have to deal with the fact that the executive branch is making a de facto policy, and Congress is very comfortable letting it happen. The boat strikes in the Caribbean happen in a legal gray zone where multiple agencies happen to overlap. The Coast Guard, Southcom, Department of Homeland Security, CPB, Air and Marine, Navy sometimes, State Department, and local Caribbean governments. Congress would actually need to clarify roles, authorities, and the rules of engagement. They haven't. Why? Because the minute you define responsibility, you actually define the blame. So the executive fills the void with temporary guidance, classified memos, and improvisations on the water. And that's why nobody can tell the public what's authorized, who authorized what, under what legal standard, based on what intelligence significance, and with what accountability. Congress has been asleep at the wheel, or worse, awake but pretending to be asleep. So the Caribbean migrant crisis is actually very politically radioactive because nobody wants their fingerprints on it. Republicans want to look tough on borders without being seen as killing desperate migrants. Democrats want to look humane without appearing weak or permissive. So both sides retreat into symbolism and statements instead of statutes. You get hearings, leaked memos, angry press conferences, but no binding legislation. There is no undefined narrative. There is no unified narrative, and Congress won't actually move without one. Is this a humanitarian crisis? Is this a border enforcement issue? Is this a military operation problem? Is this a diplomatic failure? Is this a drug trafficking epidemic? Is this a unconstitutional overreach by the executive? It actually depends on who you ask, and when Congress can't agree on the diagnosis, they sure as hell won't write a prescription. Oversight is actually the enemy because oversight would expose things neither party wants to explain. So let's be straight here. If Congress held full public hearings, we would learn, 1, what the rules of engagement have been stretched to the breaking point. We would learn, 2, the intel used to justify interdictions is often fragmentary. 3, we would learn agency bumping into each other like blindfolded linebackers. We would also learn, 4, some accidental strikes aren't as accidental as they are PR teams' claims. 5, we would learn founding shortfalls create unsafe and rushed engagement. And we would learn that funding also has a lot to do with that. And the last but not least, we would learn that coordinating with the Caribbean nations is a patchwork at best. And no politician wants to be responsible for telling the American people, yes, these deaths were avoidable. We just didn't fix our broken system. So Congress talks, but it doesn't want to touch. The bottom line, to be blunt and honest about this, Congress isn't acting because action means accountability. Action means drawing lines. Action means owning tragedies. Chatter, conversations, committees, chatter costs nothing. And in a town addicted to re-election, nothing is cheaper than words. And that's the bottom line, because the Roe McClain said so. And thank you for the question.
Alligator Alcatraz, how tyranny starts with those people. Amnesty International's new report on the U.S. detention sites Alligator, Alcatraz, and Chrome is a warning flare for every American who believes in the Constitution, the rule of law, and the basic dignity of human beings. We've seen governmental cruelty before in our history, but these facilities mark a new level of calculated dehumanization on U.S. soil, and Amnesty is calling it what it is: torture, enforced disappearance, and a deliberate system designed to break people. What makes this report so chilling isn't just the details, although they're horrifying enough. It's that the government has begun giving these places cute theme park-style nicknames like Alligator Alcatraz and Cornhusker Clink, as if they're attractions instead of concentration camp-style black sites. Authoritarian regimes always begin by softening the language, making the abuses sound like logistics, law enforcement, or processing rather than cruelty. If you want to condition the public to accept state violence, you start with euphemisms. Investigators found people packed into filthy tents and trailers where toilets overflowed onto the floors and into sleeping areas. Water was sometimes rationed. Food quality was lousy. Insects swarmed at all hours. Lights were left on day and night. Cameras reportedly pointed at showers and toilets in clear violation of privacy and human dignity. This wasn't an accident. These were choices. The so-called box at the Florida concentration camp may be the most grotesque example. It's a 2-foot by 2-foot outdoor metal cage where detainees, shackled and already vulnerable, were left in blistering Florida heat, exposed to mosquitoes and biting flies, denied water, and forced to endure punishment sessions lasting up to 24 hours. These are exactly the kinds of stress position torture techniques our nation once condemned when used by dictatorships abroad. Today they're being used in our name by our government on our soil. At Chrome, Amnesty documented prolonged solitary confinement, routine shackling even during medical transport, denial of legal access, and a pervasive system of intimidation and retaliation. Medical care was often delayed or unavailable. People needing lawyers were blocked from communicating with them. This is not a processing system. It's a punishment regime. It's brutality done with your and my tax dollars and in our names. The report makes clear that these are not isolated violations. They're the design. This administration has woven cruelty into policy, permitting state-run detention networks to operate as if constitutional rights simply evaporate when you cross a razor wire perimeter. The crisis for American democracy isn't just that the camps exist, it's that they're being normalized, bureaucratized, branded, and replicated. Amnesty warns that DHS is already planning more such sites using so-called emergency authorities and no-bid contracts to create an extrajudicial detention network beyond the reach of meaningful oversight. This is exactly how authoritarian systems evolve. They never begin with political opponents. Instead, they begin with people the majority already sees as powerless. Immigrants, refugees, the poor, non-citizens, those without family or money or social standing. When the public tolerates a government treating one group of human beings as disposable, that system is inevitably expanded to inflict that same treatment on others, dissidents, politicians, people like you and me, whenever it becomes politically useful. We've seen this in nation after nation that slid from democracy into authoritarianism. The first victims are always those considered outsiders or threats to the order the regime promised to maintain. Once the public is desensitized to cages, beatings, disappearance, and secret courts, it becomes frighteningly easy to redirect these same tactics for dissidents, journalists, labor leaders, activists, and political opponents. This Amnesty International report isn't just a humanitarian alarm bell. It's a constitutional one. When due process is suspended for one class of people, it's suspended in principle for all. When the government can hide detainees in swamp camps with no legal representation, it's already established the machinery necessary to detain anyone it wants to silence. When the public is conditioned to see cages and brutality and think, this is fine, the moral system of a nation starts to collapse. We forget that the Constitution doesn't protect itself. It's protected by norms, culture, public outrage, legal oversight, and a shared belief that the state doesn't get to brutalize human beings no matter who they are. When these norms erode, when brutality becomes invisible but known or acceptable, authoritarianism doesn't arrive with a drumbeat. It arrives quietly. It arrives bureaucratically. It arrives through temporary measures and emergency facilities and processing centers set up for those people over there. Amnesty is demanding the immediate closure of Alligator, Alcatraz, and any similar state-run black sites. They call for an end to emergency authorized detention, a prohibition on outdoor punitive confinement, the restoration of access to legal counsel, real medical care, due process, judicial oversight, and a halt to no-bid construction of new camps. These aren't radical demands. They're the bare minimum for a nation that claims to believe in the rule of law. Because if we let our government create a network of secretive, cruel, extrajudicial detention facilities for one set of powerless people today, tomorrow it will inevitably turn those same systems against anyone who challenges their power. This is how every authoritarian regime in history has done it. And unless we stop it now, it's how this one will too.
Yeah. They gave it a nickname, like a roadside show, like a postcard stop where the families go. But there ain't no rise, just razor wire hems, and the lights don't turn off, they just stare through skin. They call it processing, call it keeping things clean. But I hear the hush where the truth should scream, and the words get softer, the cruel gets loud. That's how a country forgets what it vowed. If you dress up a cage in a carnival grin, you can sell the sin like it's discipline. But God don't blink and the night don't lie. You can hear the prayer in a swallow cry. There's a constitution in the swamp tonight, drowning in the dark under floodlight white. And freedom's just a rumor behind chain link vows, while we pay for the silence and we call it law. If due process dies where the outsiders stand, it won't stay buried in that no man's land. Cause a cage is a cage when it's built in our name, and the devil loves paperwork signed without shame. Toilets overflow where the children sleep, water counted out like a bargain cheap. Bugs like witnesses swarming the air, cameras on the bodies line, nobody cares. And the showers ain't private, the doors ain't real, just a slow humiliation nobody heals. It wasn't a mistake, don't call it that. It was a choice made calm in a business hat. And every emergency builds a throne with no big bricks and a dial tone. They cut off the lawyer, they cut off the line and tell you don't worry, but they're building more now. There's a constitution in the swamp tonight, drown him in the dark under floodlight white. And freedom's just a rumor behind chain link vows, while we pay for the silence and we call it law. If the process dies where the outsiders stand, it won't stay buried in that no man's land. Cause a cage is a cage when it's built in our name, and the devil loves paperwork signed without shame. They say it starts with them, the faceless and poor, the ones you can lose behind a locked back door. But history's a shadow with a hungry mouth. It don't stop at the border, it don't stay down south. 2 by 2 in the blistering heat, shackled prayer on burning feet. 24 hours with the skies a wall. Tell me, America, who do you call? There's a constitution in the swamp tonight, and it's begging for a backbone, begging for a fight. Cause if we normalize the disappearing of the weak, we'll be next in line when we dare to speak. Shut it down, let the daylight in, bring
thin, thin, cause a nation don't fall with a flag in flames. It falls real quiet while we look away. Don't look away.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Has anybody ever told you you were over opinionated? How about this one? You can talk about everything you like, but don't talk about religion. Don't talk about faith. Don't talk about politics. My name is Jerome McClain, host of Jerome McClain Show, and I want to introduce you to a show called Over Opinionated with my friend from Southwest Virginia, Josh Scott. Josh has always been told he has been over-opinionated. He always tried to hold back these opinions, but he tried to back them up when he had to say something with facts and logic. Since he's grown up in many ways, he had to change a lot of his views and his opinions, as a lot of people should. He's not a millionaire from Fox News or CNN. He's just a hard-working, blue-collar type of guy. Give Josh Scott a shot at Over Opinionated with Josh Scott. You can find him on patreon.com/overopinionated at 679. You can also check him out on Twitter at NRV_guy79. Over Opinionated with Josh Scott. Why, he is this soft-spoken guy telling you the truth. We talk about a lot of serious topics on this show. One very serious topic is women's health. One company that stood out to me was vslay.com because the owner is very transparent about her own struggles in the women's health department and has great customer service, great deals, and frequent sales. You can check her out, her great customer service, products about women's health, and frequent sales at www.vslay.com. That is www.vslay.com. Welcome back to the Jerome McClain Show. Look, it was 22 degrees here last week, so I get a bit under the weather. So forgive me for the weakness in my voice, but let me make the point here. And I need to say it very slowly because I don't want it to be misunderstood. America does not have a conspiracy theory problem. America has a meaning problem. We have always had conspiracies. That's not new. From Salem to the Red Scare to JFK, Americans have never trusted power easily, and frankly, sometimes we're right not to. But what is new is this conspiracy is no longer a question. It's a brand. It's not rebellion anymore. It's actually a way to make money. It's a revenue stream. Conspiracies used to be a thing that kind of lived on the margins of society. Now it has lighting. It has producers. It has merchandise. It has podcasts. It has Patreons. And a rotating cast of very confident people telling you with a knowing smile that everyone else, except them, of course, is lying to you. And that's where I want to do the second segment today. Because when skepticism turns into theater, when doubt becomes identity, when just asking questions becomes a shield against responsibility, that's when society starts losing its grip on the truth. Not because truth disappeared, but because discipline disappeared. So, look at this cast of characters we are dealing with right now. Alex Jones, Kanye West, Candace Owens, and Tucker Carlson. Very different people. Very different tones, but they all share one dangerous habit. They say enormous things, erroneous things, while refusing the burden of being wrong. They don't argue against reality. They raise an eyebrow at it. They wink And the wink tells it all. So let's first talk about Alex Jones. Alex Jones is not misunderstood. He is exactly what he presents himself to be. A man who discovered that fear sells better than facts. He doesn't analyze power. He mythologizes it. Everything is always on the brink of collapse. The elites are always moments away from total control. And yet somehow these shadowy elites can't quite stop him from broadcasting their secrets every single day for years at full volume. Jones doesn't persuade you. He exhausts you, keeps you in permanent state of panic, where discernment feels free and it feels almost like a luxury. And calm, relaxation, feels like a sort of betrayal. Fear becomes the point, and once fear takes over, the truth becomes optional. Fear in the hands of Jones isn't a warning, it's actually a product. Now, Kanye West is something a bit different. Kanye West is a tragedy, not necessarily a villain. And we need to be honest about that. Kanye represents what happens when a genius and genuine brilliance collides with untreated mental illness, unlimited access, and a culture that rewards collapse as authentic, being authentic. America has always had a bad habit of confusing suffering with prophecy. We see pain, and instead of responding with care, we hand it a microphone. So Kanye's unraveling wasn't met with an intervention. It was met with applause, and confidence got mistaken for coherence. So let me say this very plainly because it needs to be said. The mental illness does not make you a truth teller. Mental illness does not make you prophetic. Mental illness does not make you a prophet. And suffering does not grant historical accuracy. A broken compass does not point north just because it spins dramatically. Kanye didn't expose hidden systems of power. Kanye actually exposed what happens when genius loses its anchor and when a culture would rather be entertained than be responsible. Now I have to go to Candace Owens because Candace is not loud. She doesn't rant. She doesn't sweat. She doesn't spiral. She smiles, and that smile that she does is doing a lot of work. Her power isn't in the conclusions, it's in the insinuations. She rarely says the thing outright. She implies. She suggests. She asks questions that never get answers and raises doubts that never get examined. And when the audience walks away, they're not informed, but they're flattered, convinced they're part of a smarter, braver minority who just happened to see through it all. Now, this is contrarianism without a risk. It is rebellion without the sacrifice. Skepticism becomes a posture instead of a discipline, and the point is no longer truth, it's identity. You're not right because the evidence holds. You're right because you're not like them. And then there is Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson is the most polished of them all. Now, he doesn't rage, he chuckles. He doesn't accuse, he wonders aloud. He perfects plausible deniability like it's an art form. Tucker understands something critical about the modern media. If you ask the same question enough times, people stop hearing it as a question. They hear it as a fact that hasn't been officially acknowledged yet. And when the damage is done, he can say truthfully, I actually never said that. Now, this is skepticism minus courage. This is curiosity without responsibility. Now, here's the thread tying all these people together. None of these figures consistently ask the hardest questions the power demands. What happens if I am wrong? They flirt with dangerous ideas and then retreat behind irony, humor, mental health, or the magic phrase, we're just asking questions. Truth becomes flexible, harm becomes incidental, and accountability becomes optional. And here's the deeper issue. Conspiracy culture today isn't about facts. It's about tribe. It's about belonging. To believe a conspiracy theory is to be awake, smarter than the sheep, morally superior, part of a remnant who sees through it all. In a lonely, fractured society, conspiracy theories replace community. It replaces churches. It replaces unions. It replaces civic groups. It replaces a shared civic trust with algorithms, enemies, and endless suspicion. Different figures, often different flavors of belonging. Alex Jones offers a permanent siege. Kanye offered revelation through rupture. Candace offers elite contrarianism status. Tucker offers disbelief with manners. Different masks, but same game, same playbook. And here's the uncomfortable truth America doesn't want to face. Skepticism without rigor is not wisdom. It's vandalism inside of the library. It tears down society without building anything to replace it. It questions without responsibility. It leaves people cynical but not free. The real scandal isn't that these people exist. Every age produces entertainers shaped by its anxieties. The scandal is that we confuse provocation with philosophy and suspicion with serious. We mistake cynicism for intelligence. We mistake irony for bravery. We mistake volume for truthfulness. Conspiracy culture isn't radical. It's conservatism, but in the worst possible form of it. It preserves grievances. It rewards confusion. And it fears, I would dare say, even hates clarity. And I'll leave you with this because it matters. To lose faith in institutions may be understandable, but to replace them with influencers is careless. That is not freedom. That's decay with a microphone. And that is my thought, at least on today's second segment on the Darrell McClain Show. If you've been listening carefully to the news this week, even this year, this decade, you've noticed something very strange probably. Now what's being said is not necessarily new, but what you've noticed, especially pre-COVID or post-COVID I should say, is what's not being said, but what isn't being said. We hear a lot of moral language in American politics, a lot of talk about values, a lot of talk about defending democracy, a lot of talk about human rights, and a lot of talk about a rules-based international order. But we rarely get consistency. And consistency is the currency of credibility. And here's the connection to healthcare I want people to hear this clearly. When Americans are told that there's no money for insulin caps, no urgency for mental health care, no political will to keep hospitals open, yet somehow there's always money for weapons, there's always legal gymnastics for foreign conflicts, that disconnect doesn't stay overseas. It eventually comes back to the United States of America. So, of course, This week, once again, we saw civilian harm abroad described with the softest possible language. Regrettable, unintended, accident, under review. We watched officials argue about what happened, about if the right words were used to describe it, etc. And this is where trust breaks, because the public isn't stupid. People actually notice when more outrage depends on who's holding the weapon. When war crimes is a phrase used selectively, carefully rationed like a medicine we claim that we can't afford. America hasn't abandoned morality. It outsourced it to press releases and political talking points. And here's the dangerous part of it. When moral language becomes conditional, people stop believing any of it. You can't tell a parent struggling to afford chemotherapy that the budget is tight, and then explain without irony that billions more must move overseas immediately to help some foreign country with no questions asked. Even if the policy argument is complex, the moral optics are very simple. This is how cynicism grows its roots. And cynicism doesn't just sit quietly. It mutates. It turns into distrust of the media. It turns into distrust of institutions, distrust of the experts, and eventually, yes, into conspiratorial thinking. When people sense hypocrisy but aren't given honest explanations, they don't become scholars. They become skeptics without guardrails. Now, let me be clear, because nuance matters, at least it does to me. This is not an argument for isolationism. This is not a call to abandon our allies, and it's certainly not a defense of atrocities by anyone. And this is an argument about moral coherence. We cannot claim to be the global referee while we're writing the rule book depending on who's on the team at the time. You cannot build legitimacy abroad while hemorrhaging it back home. And this selective outrage doesn't just weaken our foreign policy, it corrodes domestic trust. It teaches people that justice is negotiable, that ethics are flexible, and that truth is actually just political. That's when people stop listening. That's when they stop listening to institutions and start listening to personalities. That's when an influencer with a microphone sounds more honest than a government with a briefing room. And then leaders will inevitably ask, why don't people trust us anymore? Well, because trust is built on patterns, not on authority, and not on slogan. Now, here's the bottom line, and this connects directly back to the healthcare segment I started off with. Media and everything else that we have talked about today. A country that cannot explain its moral priorities will clearly, eventually lose the light and the right to lecture anyone, its citizens specifically. You don't fix distrust by demanding faith. You fix it with consistency. You fix it with transparency. You fix it with the humility to say, here's what we're doing, here's why, and here's what it will cost. Now, until then, outrage will remain selective. Language will remain slippery, and the public will keep filling the silence with skepticism, anger, and suspicion. And when that happens, we should pretend to be surprised by the consequences. We're going to do a blast from the intellectual past, and we'll see you on the next episode. So on today's blast from the intellectual past, we're going to go all the way back. We're going to travel back to the Dick Cavett show. And we're going to travel back to a show that aired on May 16th of 1969. And this is with the late James Baldwin, talking to the late Paul Wise. Now, Dick Cavett had been nominated for an Emmy Award in the most recent 2012 HBO special, Mel Brooks and Dick Cavett Together Again, and won 3. The show spanned 5 decades, and his television career has defined excellence in interview format. He started at ABC in actually 1968 and enjoyed success on PBS USA and CNBC. And now, his most recent television successes were September 2014 PBS special Dick Cavett's Watergate, followed by April 2015 Dick Cavett's Vietnam. He appeared in movies, TV specials, TV commercials, and several Broadway plays. He starred in an off-Broadway production of Hellman vs. McCarthy in 2014 and reprised the role at a theater 40 in LA in February 2015. Cavett published 4 books, being with Cavett 1979, Eye on Cavett 1983, co-authored with Christopher Portfifth. His 2 recent books, Talk Show Confirmations, Pointed Commentary, Off-Screen Secrets, and 2010, A Brief Encounter, Conversations, Magic Moments, and Assorted Hijacks, October 2014, are collections of his online opinion column written for the New York Times since 2007. Additionally, he was written for the New Yorker, the TV Guide, and Vanity Fair, and elsewhere. So this is really good debate. I actually look at it sometimes back and forth. It's for the writer James Baldwin and Yale professor Paul Wise, and they get into a heated debate on discrimination in the United States of America. It's very telling, and I think we should view these things and decide which one we agree with. Again, this aired way back on May 16th, 1969.
Group here. Professor Paul Weiss, a Sterling Professor of Philosophy at Yale. And I guess I don't, oh yes I do, have a copy of the book that he recently wrote with his son. It's the one you may have read about in Time magazine called Right and Wrong. It's a dialogue between father and son. His son is here and will be out later. He's a lawyer. And Mr. Weiss is, did I mention this, Sterling Professor of Philosophy at Yale? You've seen him on the show possibly before. He's the most interesting teacher I had at Yale because he was, he didn't lecture. The class was fluid. He answers questions as they're fired at him. And I'd like him to meet you, if you haven't met him yet, and to meet Mr. Baldwin and Phyllis Newman. And here's Dr. Paul Weiss. Were you able to listen to the show backstage?
A good deal of it, but then I was behind the bus today.
Yes.
So I heard only some of it.
Did you hear anything that you disagreed with?
I disagreed with a great deal of it. I am one of Mr. Baldwin's admirers, a big fan, that is. And, of course, there's a good deal I agree with. But I think he's overlooking one very important matter, I think. Each one of us, I think, is terribly alone. He lives his own individual life. He has all kinds of obstacles in the way of religion or color or size or shape or lack of ability. And the problem is to become a man. For each one of us, I think all of us talk about poverty, race, prejudice. It's important, vital, but it's not really at the center. It deals only with the means in the way, or the obstacles in the way of becoming something much more serious and important. That is, to be someone in yourself. To become a man is a difficult job. It takes a lifetime.
I don't disagree with that at all.
I didn't think you would.
But I take that for granted. I really do.
That, you see, but by taking it for granted, you emphasize always the obstacles in the way, and that perhaps you have it in mind, but I think your hearers very often forget that you have another objective in view, the one we both agree upon.
Yes, what I'm talking about.
I thought Dick was asking that question before when he asked you, aren't you being more extreme? Isn't there some other end? Is it all hopeless? In one sense, it is not hopeless. In another sense, it is. It's hopeless in the sense that nobody ever attains the state of being a full man. But it's not hopeless in the sense that every one of us has a problem which he can resolve more or less within himself. These obstacles are terrible, I agree with you. But they're not insuperable if you know what you're looking for.
But what I was discussing was not that problem, really. I was discussing the difficulties, the obstacles, the very real danger of death thrown up by the society when a black man attempts to become a man.
Yes, but there's another point in connection with that, and I suppose you do agree. All this emphasis upon black men and white does emphasize something which is here, but it emphasizes it or perhaps exaggerates it, and therefore makes us put people together in groups which they ought not to be in. I have more in common with a black scholar than I have with a white man who's against scholarship. And you have more in common with a white author than you have with someone who's against all literature. So why must we always concentrate on color or on religion or this? There are other ways of connecting men.
I'm not talking about that. I understand
I know
that.
you're not.
I understand that. But as we sit here now, by the will of the people, a man named Ronald Reagan governs California. And the terms I'm using, you must understand, are not the terms that I myself might choose. I'm not interested in whether a person is white or black or green or yellow. But I'm talking about the force of the state which at this moment is oppressing black people all over this nation.
Not all.
The force of the state which is oppressing every black man in this nation.
You write freely, don't you not? Is black getting in your way as being a writer, an author?
Yes.
It is, of course not. I'd like to know how being black gets in the way of your being an author.
In the first place, now you put me a little bit on the spot. I don't like to discuss myself or my work.
All right, let's not talk about you. Let's talk about some other black author or white author.
No, let's not do it that way. I'll tell you what I mean. I'll use myself. Let's go for broke. It is the first difficulty then is to, and you will say this is true for everybody, but I am like you, all right? In the first place, I have to deal with the fact that my history is inaccessible to me. That my history in this country begins with the bill of sale.
Your individual history?
My name is Baldwin.
Yeah,
it's an old English name.
That. My name is Weiss. It was been derived from somebody else. Maybe my great ancestor was White Hand or whatever. I don't know.
But you have at least the Psalms of David.
I don't have them. I don't think I've read them in 10 years.
That doesn't matter.
Or 20. I couldn't tell you one of that.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't it?
No, it doesn't. One's got to face this fact. Let us say we're both black, right? We both get here at the same time, right? You come from one tribe, I come from another. You speak one language, I speak another. We cannot talk to each other. We don't know what is happening to us. We're confronting a white man with a Bible and a gun and a cross. And what you have to do, if you're going to live, is accept this stranger, this book you cannot yet read, under the gun. Wait a moment. You asked me a question. I'll do my best to answer it.
Yes, but you must give me a chance to say something,
too.
One
moment.
All right.
1 moment. I really will. I'm not trying to...
Can I do something even more unforgivable because due to the mechanics? If we don't pause now, we may not be back for a while. So we will, and then we'll be back. Stay with us. Gentlemen, where were we?
I was in the middle of the Psalms of David.
Yes, right? It was attributed to me somehow.
But I was trying to make a point. The point is this simply. That one began here with a history of an identity, not only inaccessible, but also systematically and deliberately denied and destroyed. The Moynihan Report talks about the breakup of the Negro family. And it occurs to me as a very bitter kind of comment on the people who did their best to break up that family. Now to blame the family for being broken up. And to suggest...
He wasn't doing that by the report I read.
Okay. Well, there are no male father images for no child. Big news.
But he was trying
in the first place, that's not as true as Moynihan would like to think. Otherwise, there would be none of us here at all. The point is that, then, come back to where I was. One has to really excavate out of the absence of a history and then and then out on the presence of a history which is absolutely indescribable. You must remember that I was taught, and children, black children until today are being taught, that no black people ever contributed anything to history, that I was not much better than an ape, and I was lucky to be discovered in Africa by white people.
Mr. Baldwin, but if your case were carried out all the way through the way you're putting it, it'd be hard to understand how you ever wrote a word. After all, you're a distinguished novelist. You must have had time of freedom. Somebody must have paid attention to it. You must have been reviewed objectively as an author, not as a Negro. Nobody gave a damn whether your great ancestor had been bought or sold, but they treated your literature or your work in its own terms. That's where you wanted it. That's where you had it. That's where you're having it now. What are you criticizing? What are you objecting to? That there are terrible injustices, everyone admits. But you're generalizing and you're rigidifying, you're solidifying it in such a way as if there's no way out. You're an exhibition of the fact there's a way out.
Am I?
Yes. You yourself admit it. You're not just the incarnation of blackness. You're an author. That's the way I think of you.
I beg your pardon. I'm also the oldest of 9 children, all of whom are black. I'm one of the few survivors of my generation, all of whom the people I'm speaking of are black. For every Jimmy Baldwin or Sammy Davis or Harry Belafonte or Sidney Poitier, there are a whole lot of people you never heard of, at least equally talented, perhaps more talented, who did not manage. I'll tell you how one makes it in this country if you're black. You know, you have to decide somehow that you are not going to be controlled by what white people think of you.
Of course. Not with anybody. What anybody thinks of you, ultimately you have to think of yourself and be true to yourself.
I don't care what Senator Eastland thinks about me.
Who cares?
Or Ronald Reagan thinks about me, but they have the power to destroy my life and the life of my children, and this is given them by the will of the state. I'm not talking about myself as a writer. Of course I'm a writer. I know that. I know what produced me, too. And it was not simply Charles Dickens or any of your colleges. It was also Bessie Smith and Ray Charles and my father, who was a preacher, and my mother, who learned how to sing.
That's true of anybody who's a writer.
What I am trying to say is that the gap, the distance placed between myself and my own assessment, my own experience, was much greater than it would be for any white person in this country.
I don't believe it.
I know you don't believe it. I'm not complaining. I'm not copying a plea. It's not a special plea. I'm trying to make you see something. Pretend I'm an actor.
Child starts from scratch. They are helped in various exterior ways in order to be able to find themselves. But the finding of themselves goes within. To become a writer is something that you have to struggle with by yourself, in yourself. And all these other things are conditions and problems, and I grant you had more than other people have.
I didn't even say that. I said they were different. I'll tell you this. When I left this country in 1948, I left this country for one reason only. One reason. I didn't care where I went. I might have gone to Hong Kong. I might have gone to Timbuktu. I ended up in Paris, on the streets of Paris, with $40 in my pocket on the theory that nothing worse could happen to me there than had already happened to me here. You talk about making it as a writer by yourself. You have to be able then to turn up all the antenna with which you live, because once you turn your back on this society, you may die. You may die. And it's very hard to sit at a typewriter and concentrate on that if you're afraid of the world around you. The years I lived in Paris did one thing for me. They released me from that particular social terror, which was not the paranoia of my own mind, but a real social danger visible in the face of every cop, every boss, everybody.
Everybody, no matter who, no matter what his attitude, is bigoted.
I did not say that.
Well, has an attitude. It's on his face. Is in the way of every boss.
But you're asking me to do something impossible. You're asking me to take the will for the deed. I don't know what most white people in this country feel, but I can only include what they feel from the state of their institutions. I don't know if white Christians hate Negroes or not, but I know that we have a Christian church which is white and a Christian church which is black. I know, as Malcolm X once put it, it's the most segregated hour in American life is high noon on Sunday. That says a great deal for me about a Christian nation. It means I can't afford to trust most white Christians, and certainly cannot trust the Christian church. I don't know whether the labor unions and their bosses really hate me. That doesn't matter, but I know I'm not in their unions. I don't know if the real estate lobby is anything against black people, but I know the real estate lobbies keep me in the ghetto. I don't know if the Board of Education hates black people, but I know the textbooks I give my children to read and the schools that we have to go to. Now, this is the evidence. You want me to make an act of faith, risking myself, my wife, my woman, my sister, my children, on some idealism which you assure me exists in America, which I have never seen.
Right. Do you want to take 30 seconds to answer that?
Jonathan.
All right. We will be back after this message.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Of course, if you want to support the show, you can do so by going to www.patreon.com and getting a membership for as little as $3 a month. Again, that's www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show. The Jerome McClain Show is fully listener-supported, independent media that won't lead you to tribalism. Get a membership and support independent media at www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show.